Good morning. So, Thursday market breakdown. The markets are looking absolutely phenomenal at the moment, I'll be honest with you. There's so much potential in the market for so many different things. So, just kind of going to drill straight into it, starting with, as we can see with the DXY, we can see that price has tapped into this inflection point that we've been looking at. It's no major area of significant right now, but it can play a level of significance. So what I'm really looking at over here is that what actually is the gameplay. So do we just correct and make our way down here before we push up and then we go higher? Is that a gameplay, or do we actually just continue and just push aggressively? That is also a possibility. So we have to also be aware that, price can reject from these areas. It's just at the moment, given this massive move up, it only makes sense for it to accumulate money here. What I am looking at on other related USD pairs like USD yen is obviously, price could potentially just drop off and come down here. So you have to also be aware that, not every single US pair could act in correlation with the DXY, because the counter pair may act somewhat significantly different. So that's just something to bear in mind. But just jumping on to the next one, which is now what I do like about Euro USD is that we have come down into this sort of price action where we've just been kind of correctively moving lower, and now we've aggressively started pushing higher. At this point in time, I am seeing that we've rejected from this inflection point, which is completely okay. However, we are now moving sideways, and we do have some bullish momentum in the market, which actually gives us that confluence that the DXY as well could be moving down aggressively today. So looking at this, we have a nice little middle section here. Wouldn't say it's the nicest, of course, but we do have a middle section in as such where we go to the 1 hour, it's a little bit more clear. And essentially over here, we can see that in price we are now going to be potentially breaking through this price zone, and if we can break through here aggressively, we can potentially come up to these levels here. If we do make it to these levels, or even first inflection point, which is here, which would be in line with the DXY's analysis for this to potentially just come back lower, but this could potentially just start popping off and the DXY could go down aggressively. We could get this nice little pattern over here before we start selling off. So at the moment, a lot more things are looking a little bit more probable. I think we just need to be a little bit more on the patient side of things, because when they do shape up, they're going to be very, very nice. So I am looking out for some aggressive momentum on Euro related pairs today, US related pairs. We do have some news coming out tomorrow, which is Friday, which is Michigan consumer prices, and that's basically it. So nothing of major interest, just being aware that there will be some news there. But at the moment, I will be looking at some corrective price action to potentially just push aggressively. If that does work out, it will be in favor for the US related pairs that I'm looking for. So even so, I think this is going to be a phenomenal trade, and Aussie US dollar is also looking pretty sharp. So the Aussie US dollar, yesterday I was looking at this, and basically this just caught my eye. It didn't look like it was fully developed, but because of how price was moving on the US dollar, it still had that aggression to push lower. But then when I was looking at the other Aussie pairs, it did look like it had a lot more ball in it, and I think this is just one more little push higher. So essentially what I'm going to be looking at is something like this. So I'm looking for price to potentially make its way back up to here as a first price point to see if we do reject from there, or if we do continue and we extend a little bit further, is that the gameplay. So those are basically the two areas I'll be eyeing up, but this override could be in line with everything else, so I'll just give it some time. But most highly probable, I will be looking at the third touch sort of area here. Doesn't have to quite make it completely, but as long as it's in line with the other Aussie related pairs, I think it's going to be phenomenal. So if we're looking at this and we're looking at Euro US dollar, we're also seeing a very similar price action amongst both of them. It just means that Euro US dollar has a lot more move in it for it to go that way. So at the moment, those are the pairs that I am just kind of keeping an eye on at the moment. I think for Aussie US dollar, this is phenomenal price action, but we might get some sort of corrective price in there before we move higher. So just keep an eye on that for sure. I think today or tomorrow it could shape up, so for that reason I would personally put this one on watch and then just set an alert over here in this region here, just so that, you know, if something does happen, I'm always aware. You know, even if I am by the charts, I'm not by the charts. In a matter of minutes, if not towards the end of the hour, I might be walking my dogs. I want to be aware of these things. So set the alert, let the alert kind of attach to your attention. If you miss it, you miss it. It doesn't matter. Accept that before it happens, and then we'll see how it goes. Obviously, we'll be evaluating the rule of three, which is basically how we're approaching it, to just see if that, you know, we're getting some sort of good price action to evaluate what type of entry I'll be taking. But this is essentially it for AU. So let's move on to the next one, which is Aussie Swiss. So yeah, Aussie Swiss. So Aussie Swiss's structure is somewhat a little bit better in my opinion. You see how it needs that long, well, that solid push up now? It's kind of giving me a very good indication of a good sort of price value area. So looking at the Aussie pairs, you know, that aggression is definitely required. I'm looking for that, looking it down. And I think this is my most favorited Aussie pair at the moment out of all of them, just because of how the full structure has formed. Nevertheless, you know, don't get attached to these things. This can still pull and go further, but it's probable that it will be coming back down and then continuing with this. But the possibility is it can just continue, keep going up. So just be on your A game with that, because obviously, you know, the Aussie related pairs are looking phenomenal, but they can just extend and have one more push up further before they come down. So just keep that in mind before taking any entry. But this is going to be a phenomenal entry. This one is probably going to be my most favorited entry to be taking so far. I'll set the alert. It's worth being extra patient with these ones, because when they come through very well. This isn't the strongest first inflection point in my opinion. I think, you know, it's not the easiest to make out the, you know, 0.1, 0.2, but, you know, just to kind of be on your A game, just keep it parallel, just keep it as parallel as possible, and then just go with that for now, and then just wait for price to push up and push back down. We might even tap into a zone just above it, which is sometimes something that happens quite a lot. So that's why I would say put this here, and then if price does go up and then we're up here somewhere, you're not surprised if price does something like this and then goes, because, you know, it's a part of something that you actually thought about prior, so your brain's already recognized that that's a possibility. And if that being a possibility and you took that, or you lost money in that sort of case, you know where you want to reposition yourself when it does happen. Or if it does push itself up and then it goes down, you haven't missed a trade, because what you actually forecasted works out in the bigger picture and it moves out into your direction. And then next thing you know, in a week's time from now, when price was up here, it's already down here somewhere, and then you're like, wow, okay, cool, my analysis was really good, I'm improving, I'm progressing. That's the most important part. So that's basically my analysis for Aussie Swiss. We're going to move on to the next one, and just to make sure, I'll mark that one as red just so it's there and I've got my alert set. Aussie CAD. So Aussie CAD is pretty much the same. It's just the structure's not as lined up as the other ones, but, you know, we just look at them possibilities. So we have to look at, because price is coming in the middle here, we have to look at the next price point above, which is basically the POS, which is the point of sale. So essentially I'll be looking at this point of sale over here, and then essentially price will have to get involved. So like I said before, we don't really have the confirmed top. We can keep it as parallel as possible, but let's not get caught up in these areas. Let's just look at this as 0.1, 0.2, and then if price comes up, can it reject and come back down? That's the most important part now. How we get there is not very much important anymore, because this overall it's good, but it's a very difficult trade to just say, you know, this is where it's going to sell off, or this is over here is where it's going to sell off. We want to be looking at, you know, these sort of key value areas and see how price rejects from those areas. So definitely keep your eye on that. Make sure that you're sharp, and we'll see how that plays out. We can see that we have a A to B movement over here. And if we take that pole, stick it over here, it does somewhat line up over here. So this does give me that extra bit of confirmation, but at the same time it's not enough for me to just say I'm going to take an entry over here, because it's in the middle of this. Even though we can say, oh, but yeah, it's retesting something, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I want to see that price taps into this and then starts rejecting, and when it starts rejecting, then I'll be looking for some entries, because at the end of the day, even if everything else is selling off, there's a lot of opportunity across the board. So definitely worth keeping your eye on this one. I think this one, out of pretty much a lot of them as well, is very, very nice. I think in terms of a risk reward, this is probably one of the nicest ones as well. You know, this can basically run all the way back down here. So keep that in mind, that this can be a phenomenal gameplay. So Aussie CAD is definitely one that I would say you want to keep on a close eye on, but for me personally, it may not be a trade to take today. It would be one that I'll keep on watch for sure. I'll definitely keep this one on watch. I think, you know, there's a price point here which I'm not going to entertain just because of where the other Aussie pairs are, but I'll look at it over here just because I have a little bit more confluences in that area, and then wait and see how price, you know, I think most probably all my alerts will go off at the same time, and then it'll be like, oh my god. So mentally preparing myself for that is also very good. Market is red, so I've got it on watch, and then basically, yeah, just my Aussie pairs are there. So really happy I've got my Aussie pairs on watch this week. That's why doing your Sunday market breakdown is so important, because you're actually preparing mentally for these sort of trades. So when it does happen, I'm not going to be in any other state of mind rather than abundance, a calm, collective mindset, and I'm going to be making very rational decisions. I'm going to be proactive, and I'm going to be, you know, literally sharp when I need to be, especially when all these alerts are kicking off, prices moving quite heavily, there might be some volatility in the market. Doesn't matter. I know where I need to be. I have a zone over here, and then I have a zone over here, and then if they both don't play out, it is what it is, but the probabilities are stacked in my favor, and that's a better way to be looking at it. So let's move on to the next one. Now, Euro Aussie is going to be phenomenal, honestly. So what I've been looking at on here is basically, is this going to potentially just be a very messy middle bit to push up? Now, that's a possibility, but at the same time, we can still run into, well, move into this potential forecast. So there's a few variations on the table, and I think this one is coming closer to being the most probable at this point, where this is becoming a very messy middle bit to this larger running channel that we're going to just run to the downside with. It's not the easiest to kind of just pick out, but if we look at it for what it is, this could be a solid trade at the moment, but we have to remember that once we tap into this, we can come all the way back up here, take out all of these trades, and then continue our run down. So bear in mind, getting positioned over here is good for a short, but at what risk? Because the thing is, we've also tapped into this low and we started pushing up higher, but then we just had some level of rejection. So if we can tap into something like this, then I may be inclined to go short, where we essentially come in over here and then we move back up and then we start to reject. That's a trade that maybe I'll entertain. But then at the moment, looking at the higher time frame picture, it's somewhat messy, but there was a head and shoulders in here to go to the low, and we are within a running channel, so seeing patterns within patterns are not actually such a bad thing. But at the same time, there's room for this to potentially just move down aggressively at this point. So that's something that I'm kind of working with at the moment and looking for. But at the moment, using a bit of pattern separation, this sort of pattern here is accumulating a lot of money. The better option for me at this moment in time is to wait for the break below, the pull back up, and then kind of evaluate. But we'll have to wait and see how this develops. So I'm not going to put this one on watch just because of where it is in the market. Even if that did shape up, I don't think it will be the one that I would entertain, because really and truly there's a lot going on in here at the moment, and that sort of price action is probably going to tag me and tag me out, and it's going to take away my focus from some of the other pairs which are better shaped up for my particular trading plan. So for that reason, I'm not going to be putting EA on, but just to let you know, if you were going to have EA on, you know, there's a potential flag over here, which it's not really coming from a high value area as well. There's a flag there, and then, you know, we have a low just not too far away, but there's a few confluences there, but there's also some variations of patterns to be aware of. We can also form into this, where we kind of move up further, which I think is the one that I'm more in favorable for this pattern, where, you know, we kind of tapped in here and then we start moving up, and that's why this kind of runs a little bit higher risk. So yeah, for those reasons, I'm kind of just going to stay out of it. But EA is looking solid. It's just, there's just too many variations going through my head at the moment, and perhaps maybe coming back to it in a few hours with a different set of eyes will maybe change my perspective and price somewhat developing a little bit different. But at the moment, it's not one that I'm going to entertain. So let's jump into the wildcards. Wicked. So GBP CAD from the wildcards. Now this one has been solid, honestly. So we see this low over here. This was the point we tapped into it. We actually triggered my alert. For some reason it's still there. I was looking for a third push down. We didn't quite get that, which is completely fine because it wasn't one that I was set on completely anyway. And now we started aggressively moving up, which is phenomenal. Honestly, there were so many trades in here that you could have caught. There was a trade in here. There was trade kind of just a little squeeze down there. Wouldn't have taken that one. There was this trade here. Obviously I'm on the 15. You can go to the hourly and you can kind of see it a little bit more clear. There was that little price zone over there, which I think a lot of traders probably got involved here, hence the volatility. And then obviously the break above. That's basically when I saw it and I was kind of like, I don't want to entertain that trade. And then now it's all the way up here. So GC is looking good for that buy, honestly. I think at the moment, if I'm going to be taking a trade, I'll probably stay on the 1 hour and I'll wait for price to gravitate back down to something like this and then I'll go. But at the moment, looking at price, it's probably not that likely for price to do something like this. We just got to wait and see, but that would probably be some sort of gameplay I would look for in order for me to take a long position. I think GC is a little bit missed for me at the moment. Would I take an entry now? Probably not. Let it play out. Some structure will form eventually and I'll be able to capitalize into it. But coming towards the end of the week and having these Aussie pairs on board, I think GC is a bit of a mistrade for me now. It is a phenomenal entry, you know, definitely eyed it up over here, eyed it up over there. It's just countlessly, there was other trades on the table, decided to opt out for it. So for those reasons, just going to leave it and let's move on to the next one, which is GA. We could probably say that this is probably the best one yet. I'll tell you something about GA. GA is phenomenal, honestly. GA has been a strikingly good pair. It's just unfortunately at this moment in time, it's doing this sort of corrective squeeze, right? Where we could get that possibility where this happens, and if this happens, we can see the similar sort of, maybe possibly similar price action on EA. But basically what's happened is we've squeezed down low, we've tapped into the low, and then we've basically squeezed again. So we've basically had the same bigger pattern but on a smaller scale. Now what we can see here is that we squeezed in twice and then we had that final little push. Are we going to get the same thing and just push a little bit further, tap into this low over here? So I'd say attention needs to go down here, tap into this, which we did something quite similar over there, tap into this and then go. This line isn't the highest level of confluence for me. I'm just saying it's a possible area. We would take away this, put this over here now, and look at that as the low. So essentially I just want to see one thing. Do we kind of just scoot back down, tap into this and then go back up, or do we break through, tap into the 1 2 3, kind of extend a little bit more, push back up and then go? As we can see, we had similar price action over here. So we did that, and then as we tapped, we moved further, we broke this and then we came up. So that's the sort of price action that I'm going to kind of like dabble with. But I think at the moment, you know, there's a few possibilities on the table. You know, GA can solidly just go up if it wants to, or it can aggressively just go down. But at the moment, because of how price is acting up, I think I'll be patient with this and I'll wait. But I think this is going to be a solid buy, honestly, a absolutely solid buy when it shapes up. We just have to be smart about it. But at the moment, it is correctively moving lower, so we just have to let the cards play. Once they've shown and revealed what the gameplay is, we can really get involved. At the moment, I'm looking at this and I think I'm just going to keep it so simple and just wait for price to come into that. So that's basically my gameplay at the moment for GA, and I think GA is looking stunning. So we got to give that one time to develop. It won't be probably this week in my opinion, and if it is, I probably wouldn't take a trade. So I'm gonna leave GA off, but let's move on to GBP US dollar. Now this one personally is absolutely stunning. It might be ready later today. Well, most probably it will be. I think I didn't get that sort of that really nice sort of price I was looking for, but I do have this, which near enough for me is somewhat decent, you know. It's one of them ones where I think now if I'm going to be taking a trade, it's got to really be, you know, it's got to really be good. And it's not the easiest to catch, because even with taking, you know, these sort of lines, you can't really get them parallel enough. You know, just like where do I draw the line? You know, so I think I'll keep it very simple and just look at that override point and be very, very sharp with it. So essentially what I'm going to be looking at now is just how we move into this blue line. When we tap into that, we'll see where we go. If we don't tap into it and we just sell off, it is what it is. But at the moment, it's looking possible. It's looking very, very much possible that we could tap into this. It's not my traditional pattern as well. It's not the ones that I really enjoy taking. But this is sort of an area where I could potentially take a 2-touch flag. And then next thing you know, we are moving down aggressively and we're all the way down here. So that's one of the reasons why I think having GU is going to be very, very nice. I'll mark that as red just to kind of keep it on watch. I will definitely evaluate, even though we have this sort of very not so clean structure in my opinion, and I think if I'm going to be drawing it, I'll draw it a little bit more, you know, a little bit more so like that, and I'll just wait for it. I'll wait for a retrace on it and see how that goes. So that'll be one. I'll probably take this with a little bit lower risk just because the risk reward is definitely there. Looking at that, let's say it pushes back in here, capitalize over there, even with a 23 pip stop loss to the low of this, we're looking at about 7.8, and then to the low 16%. So that's still a pretty good trade in my opinion. I think it just needs a little bit more time to develop, but when it develops, it's going to be good. This trigger is probably going to go off within the next hour, within this hour. So let's just wait and see how that plays out. But cool. And the next one we have is GBP yen. So GBP yen needs a little bit more time for development. I'm just a bit cautious about this one because it could possibly form into this right now, and if we get that aggressive price movement, we could see that across the board for a few other yen pairs, which would maybe give me an indication that, you know, well yeah, we'll go into that with USD yen in a second, but basically this is it. So if price can push aggressively back up here, that'll be somewhat of interest, but it doesn't need to. That's the one thing we have to understand. Price can just reject and sell off from here as well, but because of how price has been moving within this sort of price action here, it looks very much possible that we can come in for this, and then when we do come in for this, this is going to be phenomenal. It looks like it's going to definitely be a Friday or an early next week trade, but it might need some time to develop. It could get a little bit messy, and we might see it happening maybe around about Monday, Tuesday. So keep that in mind. This is going to be solid. If it sells off, it sells off. It is what it is. But this is pretty much the trade that I'll be looking for. And yeah, I think this is going to be absolutely good. Like, can't really stress enough how good these sort of trades play out. So we'll have to wait and see, and then to that low, you know, that's phenomenal in terms of a risk reward as well. You could probably even squeeze in a 10 pip somewhere within here, so, you know, just give it some time. But personally, let's just say even 20, you know, 20 is more than enough. You know, 64% to that low, if that plays out, that's phenomenal. But anyway, we're going to move on to USD yen, which is my most second favorited one after Aussie Swiss. Brilliant. So we have USD yen now. USD yen was one that's really been on my eye for a long time. Honestly, like throughout all of this, it's been stunning. You know, like the structure, the formations, everything about it has just been phenomenal. Definitely has made it to one of my most favorited instruments amongst Aussie Swiss right now. But for sure, USD yen is phenomenal. Honestly, I have not seen anything so beautiful in a long time. So what we're currently seeing here is if we go to the daily, we've basically not tapped into this yet. We've got near miss, which is leaving a possibility that we can push and actually tap into that before we go back up. We don't need to. We can actually still correct and go up further before we come lower. There's so much happening in here. We have to be able to understand the possibilities and the probabilities. But given the circumstance that we've completed this a very not so much clean 1, 2, 3, tapped into this inflection point, creating a flag within a flag, pattern within a pattern as well, and we've evolved so much in such a nice way. What we can be seeing is essentially this, right? There's two things. We see this tap into this, reject, create a flag, and then we go from here, and then we sell to this point here, fill the gap, and then once the gap's filled, we see aggressive bullish momentum on the USD yen and probably following on the DXY. Now, what I'm currently seeing on the 1 hour chart over here, if we get a little bit more clear, is we've tapped into this point here, and we've rejected. Now we've rejected quite well. The thing is, I took an entry in over here yesterday. Unfortunately, I was too aggressive, and I think it was roughly around about a 23 pip stop loss, and I was tagged out over in this region here, and it was during like early morning, had a business meeting, and yeah, it is what it is. And then I was able to re-enter in the morning somewhere down here. Did have to take a little bit of a larger stop, so yeah, over here, and then that's basically it. So I basically took this trade here, but now I'm running pretty well at the moment, 2.769%, so it's not too bad, but obviously I took less risk because obviously I took the other loss as well, so I don't want to be repositioning myself constantly in the market, taking loss after loss. There is also, you know, the probability of you know, this really dropping off, which is great, because even if it does make it to 25% there, even if it doesn't, that's completely fine. You know, it's well protected now, and then obviously bearing in mind that there's the possibility of this turning around, looking at how Euro USD is and how the DXY is, there's so many possibilities. But if we have a quick look at the Euro USD one more time, we can see if this aggressively starts moving up, the DXY aggressively starts moving down, and so does the USD Yen. And then as that completes, we might see even more aggression on this pair. Hence the reason why putting all of these confluences together has given me the bias to say this is going to be a very good trade. And what I do like about this is it was no coincidence that this price took everyone out, or a majority of people, because by doing that, it basically says everyone who kind of opened the position and then woke up the next day, kind of didn't know what was happening, has been taken out, or positioned themselves, you know, whatever, management, they've been taken out. You know, now we can just kind of start the run, and then all of the people who do know what's going on can get involved. So it's just one of them things where I think psychologically it's really playing with people, because they tag people out and then they continue to move, and it happens time and time again. You know, it doesn't always happen, but it happens a lot of the time. So being aware of that, you have to know when and where you would reposition yourself. And if you're taking too much risk on trades, you're not going to want to re-enter on trades like this, especially getting taken out twice. It's going to really mess with your psychology. So just wanted to kind of share that with yourself. And yeah, absolutely, it's been phenomenal. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like, subscribe, a comment. You know, I'd be more than happy to get back to you. And yeah, happy trading. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next